Hi guys, Ali here, and today we are going to have a first live coding session for HTML. And since HTML is a text-based language, you can use any text editor that you like for this coding session. You can use Notepad and just create a new folder and start following me using Notepad. But in this case, I usually avoid picking technologies or suggesting my favorites, but in this case, I would definitely make an exception and suggest that we use Visual Studio Code from Microsoft. It's a totally free editor, comes with a ton of options. It's kind of a de facto standard for the web development world, and you're going to find ton of support on Stack Overflow and everywhere in the web development ecosystem for this. So go ahead and go to this code.visualstudio.com website and download the editor for your platform and go ahead and install it. Once it's installed and you open it, it's going to show up something like this. So this is the editor where you specify a folder and then it lets you manage all the contents within that folder. So go ahead, do an open folder and select the folder that you would be using for this practice. Right, so once you do this, you're gonna see something like this, a blank panel staring you in the face. That's because we don't have any files here. And if you saw a pop-up appearing asking you whether you trust the authors, you can quickly go ahead and select I trust the authors. So anytime you open a new folder, it checks with you whether you trust the contents of that folder because sometimes there are executables inside that folder and they can contain malicious code. So it's always going to ask you for any new folder. There's no problem. Just go ahead and click I trust the authors in this case because you are the author and I hope you trust yourself. So Visual Studio Code comes with a ton of extensions. As you can see, there are a whole bunch of options for HTML. So these are all add-ons to Visual Studio to make your coding experience more pleasing, you can say. There are code snippets, formatting add-ons, preview add-ons. For this exercise, I'm going to ask you and search for live preview extension from Microsoft and go ahead, select it. And I have it already installed on my side. So you're going to see install option appearing here. Go ahead and click it. And once that extension is installed, what it's going to do is, oh, let me just read it. An extension that hosts a local server for you to preview your web projects on. So as you code, it's going to show you a live preview in a browser right inside Visual Studio Code. So let's see that in action. So once you're done, come here and let's create a first HTML file. So practice.html. Right. You can use this button or you can use file, new file to do so. So we have a practice.html file and how to see the preview. If we go back to the extension and read here, it says preview your HTML files quickly by clicking the preview button in the top right corner of your editor. So I'm going to go do just that. We go to practice.html and here is the show preview button on the right. And wow, this web browser is started. If you don't know about it, 127.0.0.1 is an IP address, which actually means your own machine or your local machine. And this local web server started on port 3000. And it is showing you practice.html in the browser. It's blank because your file is blank. So I can quickly type something like hello, and it's going to appear here. But that hello does not make it a valid HTML document. So let's start right in with our coding. So if you recall, the first thing is the doctype declaration. And this is the great thing about Visual Studio Code. Just see, we are in an HTML file. I just typed the less than sign and it's giving me a suggestion because it knows that I'm starting a HTML file editing. I can just press tab and it completed the entire doctype declaration for me. Since we have started with the doctype declaration, if you remember, doctype declaration tells the browser what is coming up. So what is going to follow this doctype declaration would be my HTML document. And the browser is going to know that it is a HTML5 or the living standard HTML document because we said HTML here. If you're using HTML4 or earlier, you're going to provide a full URL to the corresponding document type declaration, but we are not going to do that for now. We have a lot to cover, so let's quickly jump right in and create a mini HTML document before we come back and discuss it. So as you can see, as I close the starting tag, it automatically inserted the end tag. So let me quickly go ahead and add a bunch of content before we discuss what it is about. So I'm gonna create a head section inside this HTML, and in here I'm going to define a title tag. Don't worry, we are gonna come back and discuss all of them. So in the title tag, I say title of my first amazing web page. All right, and as you noticed, as I type the title, the contents of my title element start appearing as the text of my web page tab, right? So this is exactly what is going to happen on Chrome or any other browser that you use. So this title is going to define the heading for that. And if you hover over any element, the title element represents document, it's going to give you a full MDN reference for that particular element. So you can get a quick help from that as well. Okay, so we are going to come to head element later on. First off, let's go ahead and create a body tag, which is going to contain the contents of our HTML document. So let me quickly add a bunch of stuff here. So I define a div tag, and in here I'm going to define a h1 tag. If you recall, there were 6 headings in basic HTML, h1 being the biggest. So my big fat heading. All right, so h1 was the biggest. So let's try see what h2 looks like. My biggish heading. And as you can see, it's still bold, still bigger, but not as big as the H1 tag. This is how it is supposed to see. So, all right, next up, let's add a paragraph tag. Uh, I know I'm jumping the gun here, but don't worry, we are going to explain everything here. So I'm just adding it so we can see a bunch of options at play. So add a paragraph tag right now, and weather is amazing today. And while we are at it, let's why not add a comment and try out how it looks like. So if you recall, comments are not considered part of the HTML document. The browser is going to completely ignore them. I'm just going to say this is the first line of my paragraph. Right? As you can see, this comment did not appear anywhere in my browser. All right, so what do we have here? We have a full HTML document available to us. So let's quickly look at what we just did. We have our doctype declaration, which is telling us that we are using the living standard for what is to follow, and what follows is this HTML element, which we know that we are following the HTML5 standard here. And the browser is going to apply the standard rendering mode for this document because it's the latest one and the most optimized one, which the browser is going to render it with the most efficient rendering system. Next up, we have the head portion, and the head portion does not contain any contents that appear in the browser. It's information about the HTML document. The head does not mean the top area of your HTML document. It's just the head of the HTML document, not the document that is appearing, not your content. All of your content is inside the body tag, anything that you can actually see or render in your browser. So the head section contains title, which you can actually see, but it does not appear in the browser. It is appearing above the browser in the title bar in the favorite section. If I bookmark this, it's going to be the title of my bookmark. And The title, as you recall, would have another options like styling and a bunch of other things that we are going to come to. Inside the body tag, we defined a div tag, which, if you recall, was an invisible element. But being invisible does not mean that it's useless. We are just, when we jump to styling, you're going to see how useful it is. And inside there, we have our H1 heading that describes your entire document. This is followed by H2 heading, which is supposed to be smaller than H1, and there are headings all the way to H6. Actually, let's go ahead and quickly see what H6 looks like. Oh my God, H6 looks a bit smaller than the actual text, but it's a bit bold. So if I zoom in a bit, see, it still is a bit bold, but size incrementally got smaller than the text itself. That's what I mentioned in my HTML video, that headings are just relative to each other. And the browser knows how to present them. And this particular browser chose to make the H6 heading smaller in size than the standard text, but just making it a bit bold. So you can control all aspects of the presentation. So if you want to make H6 bigger, you can absolutely do so. We are going to do that in just a second. Then there is the paragraph text, and the paragraph text is supposed to contain the text portion of your web page. And if you recall, it is supposed to add blank line before and after the content. So let's actually see that in action. So pre-paragraph and add a post paragraph here. And you can see that there is a line in between. So what about between the paragraph? What is the line spacing in the paragraph itself? So for that, let's press enter and add a second line in the paragraph text saying, uh, let's go out for picnic. Okay, that's strange. We added a line break here, but it did not had any effect in our preview, and that is because the line breaks in the HTML are totally ignored. They are considered part of the editing. So to induce a line break in your content, there is a reserved HTML element called break, which is applied like this. And as you can see, we have a line break now. If you use this break tag anywhere in your document, you're going to see a line break coming up. And you can see that the paragraph lines are pretty much joined together, but there is spacing pre and post paragraph. Right, let's jump to our next HTML element that we want to discuss, which is the style element. And let's start styling this document. So if you recall, there are three types of styles: inline, internal, and external CSS. So let's start with the internal one. And the internal styling is applied in the head section using the style tag. So I'm gonna do just that. I created a style tag. So what we do in the style tag is we first specify what we want to apply the style to, and then we specify the style itself. So let's say I want to apply a style to the entire body element. So I'm gonna type body, the name of the element, and then I open a curly brace, and the closing brace was edited itself. And now if I press Control and space, the Visual Studio Code is going to show me a list of all the styling options for that particular element type. So let's go ahead and choose background color, and it immediately gives us a list of the predefined colors which you can choose from, and you can see a preview of that color as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose black. Wow, I just made my entire web page disappear with just one keystroke. This is just amazing, right? It's the power of styling. But no one is gonna appreciate that because it's just a black screen. So where did my content go? Well, my content did not go anywhere. If I do a selection, here you see the content is right here, but the content is styled to be black. It was supposed to be black on white background, but I made my background black and it disappeared. So let's change that. So what we have here, we have our H1 heading. So let me style it. And to change the foreground or the text color itself, we use the color option. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose red for that. Wow, if I was making a scary page, that would be the color scheme to go with. Spooky, right? But it just brought up my H1 heading, not the rest of the stuff. So if I go ahead and add a color to my paragraph as well, let's say I want to make it blue. All right, both lines of my paragraph element have appeared as well. But what about the rest of these lines which were not part of the paragraph? To style them, let's look at which element they belong to. So they belong to the div element. But let's do something different. If you remember, the external style is called Cascading Style Sheet, and the intuition was that if you apply a style to a top level element, then it gets inherited by all its children. So let's go ahead and instead of styling div, let's style the body element and specify a text color for that. And let's go ahead with green. And wow, not just this pre and post paragraph, but you can see this my biggish heading, which was actually the H6 heading, also appeared. And H6 heading was, and my biggish heading was the content of H6 element, which was contained in div and which was subsequently contained in the body tag. So applying a style to the body tag got inherited by all its children, grandchildren, and any other level of hierarchy if there existed. So this is how you style the contents of your HTML document. Okay, we have a lot of tags to cover, so let's quickly move on. But before we move away from the styling, let me just go ahead and cover the external CSS as well, because this is one of the most important things you're gonna use all your career. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called practice.css. The name can be anything. Uh, I can call it practice styling.css right here. And I created this file in the same folder as practice.html. And what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to cut the contents of this style tag, do Control X, and you see all the styling gone. I'm going to add those to practice styling.css, right? And I would go back to practice.html, remove the style element from here and replace it with a link. And the link tag, I am first going to define what that link is about. And I'm going to say it's about a style sheet. I'm going to be defining link to a style sheet element, which is available at the location. And since it's just right here, I do not have to specify any relative path, which I could do with dot slash or something. So dot slash means the current folder. Or so I'm just going to go ahead and pick practice styling.css, and all the styling came back. Why is this head in red? Because my link element is not closed, and I just closed it. The error went away. So as you can see, the styling is applied from an external file to my HTML document. And the reason external CSS is so powerful, because if I copy paste this practice.html into, let's say, a practice another file.html, uh, paste the contents here, my second amazing web page, remove all this body tag, remove the content of the body tag entirely. This is the only content, and close this, and I want to see what my practice another file.html looks like. I select that, and you can see the styling from the style sheet that we created for practice.html automatically got applied here. If I go to practicestyling.css and all right, so let's close the preview for a second. If I come back and change, let's say, background color from black to, let's say, which other color is a good one? Let's go with dark gray and save it. And if we preview practice.html, you see it is now appearing in dark gray color instead of black. And if I go to the next file and preview that, this is also appearing in dark gray background. So this is the power of CSS, that you make one change to one file and it gets applied to multiple HTML files. And note that this is really critical when it comes to have a consistent styling across website. So if you make a website and let's say you want to have a consistent font, custom font used across the website for all pages, all you need to do is have a standard CSS file which is imported in all of the web pages in your website. Another important aspect is that currently almost all websites deploy the concept of theming, though that is a bit advanced and we'll cover it when we go to the styling themselves. You must be aware that the dark mode and light mode are now consistently available across operating systems, and almost all websites support this feature. And trying to do that without using styling is kind of impossible. Or even if you do that, it would be riddled with errors, and maintenance would be a complete nightmare if you want to change any aspect of it. And external file-based style sheets make it so easy to implement. We'll cover that later. Let's have a quick look at another styling aspect, which I think it's pretty important. So let's go back to our CSS file and make a slight change that actually let me bring up the preview first. Okay, so I'm gonna go here and add another aspect called font size into the picture. So let's say I call it 4px under the body tag, right? And you see it immediately shrunk the entire preview drastically. But still, if you notice, there is variation in the font size for various things. It did not uniform. So even though we applied it in on the body tag, and ideally it should have applied font size 4 pixel to all child elements, but as you can clearly see, this is not the case. Actually, let me bring it, let's say 8px. Yeah, here it's more clear that the H1 heading is still bigger than the H6 heading, and it's even though the paragraph shrank, it's still all of these things are different sizes. So why is that? All right, to see what's happening here, we need to go to the File Explorer and let me bring in the Chrome. Let me open the file in Chrome browser. And you can do it in any of your favorite browser. All of these have this feature. And what I'm going to do is right click and inspect. All right. So what it does is it brings up Chrome Developer Tools. And here you can click on all the elements in the HTML. You can see the HTML preview here and see what styling has been applied on every individual element. So if I go here on the body element, we can see all of our applied CSS styles from our CSS file, like font size, 8px, background color dark gray, color green, H1 in red, and P in blue. They are all present on the body element, right? the H and P ones would be on their respective elements. But look at this. The top level body element has font size 8px, but if I go to H1, we see that it has the body element showing up because it is inheriting the styling from the body element. So the body element shows up in the styling pane here. But look at this, the font size is crossed out. Why is that? Because there are two concepts at play here. One is that the styles cascade from the parent element to child elements. But the other aspect is that you can override a styling at another level. So what happens is a style applied at the lowest or leaf node level takes precedence over the style applied in parent or grandparent or um, above in the hierarchy. So here, if you notice, the H1 tag from the browser has a font size 2em. And what does em means? In CSS or cascading style sheets, em is a unit of measurement which indicates size relative to the size of the font. All right, so this essentially means that 2em would mean that any font size that we apply on the body size is going to be multiplied by 2 in H1 heading. So if I keep my font size as 8 pixels, so if my paragraph text is, let's say, taking the 8 pixel because it has no overriding style for font size, the H1 tag is going to be twice as big as the P1 tag. So if I, let's say, make it 30 pixels, right? See, the paragraph tag got bigger, but H1 tag got twice as bigger in the same proportion. Okay, one final concept before we leave this topic is that the concept of precedence also exists in where the styling is coming from. So the external file has the lowest priority compared to the internal style, and the inline style has the highest priority. That is the style defined directly on an element. Right, so I think that is what we can cover in this video for today. I'm going to make another one for the rest of the elements. We have exceeded our time limit for this video, and I think it's very essential to be able to practice along and absorb all the concepts. So let this one be for the head section and styling. In the head section, we still have to cover the scripting portion, which is a big topic, and I want to cover it later on. But I think we covered all the essential head elements in this one. So we will continue the practice in another video. This is it for today. If you liked, please give a thumbs up and do subscribe to be notified of upcoming content. Thank you. Goodbye.